Hello, you beautiful people. So, we finally got the recent changes that were made to the Herta's kit, and I'm guessing you're interested in knowing what changed and if she got buffed or nerfed, right? Luckily for you, though, you've somehow stumbled on the perfect video to get all the info related to these changes. Today, I'm mainly going to discuss and go over all the changes that were made to the Herta's kit in detail, and along with this, I will also discuss a little bit about her pulling priority and the value that she provides to your account. Honestly, I have to say, I'm pretty happy with the changes that they made to her kit during the current cycle. Next up, I know that a lot of you guys are planning to pull for Fugue and Firefly in the second half of 2.7, and if you want some good discount on your Stellar Jade packs, let me just introduce LD Shop to you. This site is honestly a great top-up center, and the top-up process is really easy as well because all you need to do is select your pack and enter your UID and server in this box right here. Yep, that's the entire top-up process. After waiting for a few minutes in the game, I easily received my jades and also saved a little bit of money. By the way, if you register in LD Shop from my link in the description or the pinned comment, you will get an extra 5% off on top of all the other discounts. Alright, just a quick little info that if you spend more than $80 in a single month on LD Shop, you can get a VIP membership for yourself, and you're probably curious what this membership does, right? Well, it basically provides you with a free monthly pass, weekly discount coupons, and some monthly discount coupons as well. Anyways, moving on, I just quickly want to say the usual disclaimer that this version of the Herta's kit is not the final version, and some changes might be made to her kit in the upcoming weeks, so do keep that in mind. Also, if you haven't watched the initial video that I made where I discussed and explained her kit in detail, you might want to watch that video first before watching this one. With that being said, let's begin without wasting any more of your time or energy. Alright, the Herta received some pretty nice changes during this current cycle, and overall I'm really glad because I was planning to pull for her anyway. Okay, starting with her skill, it received some minor wording changes making the effect a lot easier to understand as it was quite confusing before, and that's literally all the changes that they made to her skill. Well, I do think her skill seems much more readable and easier to understand now, so I guess it's a decent change for casual players. Moving on to the real changes though, her ultimate was buffed quite a lot compared to her initial kit's ultimate, so let's take a quick look at that. First of all, they increased the attack boost she gets when she uses her ultimate, and now she gets a total of 80% attack boost whenever she uses it, as compared to the 64% attack boost that she got before. This is genuinely a decent buff, but along with this, the 80% attack buff now lasts for a total of 3 turns instead of 2 turns, making sure that she has really good uptime on this buff. All in all, her ultimate's utility was buffed by a decent amount, and that's pretty much it. Next up, let's take a look at the only part of the Herta's kit that got nerfed during the cycle, and this part is none other than her insanely good talent. Okay, so basically, they reduced the additional bonus damage dealt to the adjacent targets by her enhanced skill, and this bonus damage was provided by her talent. Honestly, I kind of exaggerated at the start, and this nerf isn't even that big of a deal, because the scaling on the additional bonus damage provided by her talent is already so high, and this change doesn't really do anything at the end of the day. Overall, her talent did receive a slight nerf on the paper, but it doesn't really change anything, so do keep that in mind. Alright, moving on, her technique was also changed slightly during the current cycle, and now it says that upon being used, it applies a total of 25 stacks of interpretation to the elite/boss enemy, instead of applying 4 stacks of interpretation to all the targets like it did in her initial kit. This might not seem like much at first, but this is honestly a huge buff, and let me explain why. So, if you used her previous technique, you would have a total of 20 stacks of interpretation in a 5-target scenario, and after using your ultimate, all the stacks will be transferred to the elite enemy and it will have a total of 20 stacks, which is not bad, but it's not really that helpful either. Now though, using her new or the changed version of her technique, the elite/boss enemy will have a total of 25 stacks applied to it from the very start, and this makes it really easy to build up the interpretation stacks up to their maximum limit. Well, some of you might think that this change makes her worse in AoE scenarios, but that isn't really the case either, because the damage dealt by her enhanced skill to all the enemies is based on the amount of the stacks that the main target has. And if the main target has a total of 42 stacks, her enhanced skill will deal the maximum amount of damage even if all the other enemies have no stacks applied onto them. All in all, her technique received a huge buff utility-wise, so that's pretty nice. Anyways, with that, We've discussed all the changes that were made to the Herta's base kit, and without wasting any time, let's move on and take a look at the changes that they made to her traces, and after that, we'll quickly skim through the changes made to her Eidolons and her light cone as well. Okay, starting with her first trace, it seems like now she gets some additional ice damage whenever she uses her enhanced skill on an enemy who has the maximum amount of interpretation stacks. But what if I tell you this was always the case, and it isn't really a buff or anything like that? Dude, this is one of those rare times where an effect or a damage buff was always there in the character's kit and also present in their gameplay, but it simply wasn't stated in their kit text. Yep, they didn't really change anything in her first race, and it's just a kit correction, because the damage buff was always present in the gameplay. Next up, they actually buffed her second trace, and yes, this time it's a real buff and not just a hidden effect which wasn't stated in the kit text or something like that. Basically, her initial trace made it so that whenever the Herta or her allies attacked an enemy, they applied an additional stack of interpretation to the target with the highest amount of stacks. This trace was honestly pretty decent already, but it helped her quite a lot in applying stacks a little bit faster. Now though, the first part of the trace is still the same, but they added an additional buff to it which says that if the ally who attacks the enemy follows the path of erudition, this trace now applies 2 additional stacks of interpretation to the enemy with the highest number of stacks. Overall, this is a huge buff because it helps her even more in generating stacks, and you want to pair the Herta with another erudition character in the team anyway, so it all works out and synergizes quite well. Alright, with that, we've discussed all the changes that were made to her traces, and honestly, I'm pretty happy with all these changes. Continuing on, her light cone was buffed by a decent amount, because now it gives a total of 60% damage bonus to her ultimate and her skill as compared to the 48% damage bonus that it gave in its initial or previous effect. Dude, this change actually increases her light cone's value by quite a lot because her light cone wasn't really that big of a damage increase in her initial kit. Overall, her light cone is a much bigger increase in DPS for her as compared to before, and it also makes her really comfy to use due to its other effect where it restores skill points after you use her ultimate. Finally, I know that most of you guys don't really care about her Eidolons, but for the people who want to vertically invest in her, let me just quickly skim through changes that they made to them. Starting with her E1, it was buffed a little bit, and now it makes it so that after you use her enhanced skill, you will reset all the interpretation stacks present on the enemies to 10 instead of 1, making her ultimate ramp up a lot faster. All in all, a decent buff, and that's pretty much it. Next up, they also buffed her E2 by quite a lot because now it says that whenever she uses her enhanced skill on the enemy, she advances her own action, and along with this, if the enemy that she used the enhanced skill on has the max amount of interpretation stacks, she increases the value of her action advance. Pretty huge overall because I think we all know how broken of a mechanic action advance is, right? Her E4's speed increase was also buffed by around 2% for erudition characters, which honestly changes nothing, and this is still a very bad Eidolon just like most of the other E4. Lastly, they completely reworked her E6, because it now gives her extra ice resistance penetration and increases the damage of her ultimate based on how many enemies are on the field. Honestly, the Herta's AoE is already kind of insane, even in her base kit, but her E6 provides a huge increase in damage for her ultimate in single target scenarios, making her a pretty nice unit in all the game modes, and with this E6, I can finally say that she also has a broken E6, like most of the other new DPSs. Alright, with that, I've covered all the changes that were made to the Herta's kit in the current cycle, and I have to say, I love her kit even more now. She has been buffed quite a lot as compared to her initial kit, and this is very good for me, because I was already planning to pull for her anyway. Honestly though, her pull value is pretty high after these changes, and she performs really well in all the 3 endgame modes now. Do remember to comment down how you guys feel about these changes, and also, if you ended up watching until the end, you might want to consider subscribing as well. With that being said, I love y'all, and I will see you in another one.